Welcome to Senior Insights. Come on in, find a chair, and we were going to talk today about aprons. And I wore my apron so that I was in the correct costume. I don't think there's an awful lot to talk about aprons, but I'm going to talk about it anyway because someone in this community requested that we talk about it when we were doing nostalgic things, when we were talking about kitchen stuff and old foods and dolls and toys and all that stuff. So I thought it kind of fit in with that, and maybe we'd get you reminiscing a little bit, which is a good thing. So aprons have been around for a long, long time. Oh, here I go, rocking back and forth. I am who I am, what can I say? They've been around for a long time. Early civilizations used aprons. They were worn by artisans, by craftsmen, by tradespeople in ancient civilizations. In Egypt, they were a symbol of what your profession was. So if you had a white apron, you were a mason. If you had a black apron, you were a blacksmith. And if you had a leather apron, you were a butcher. So they were signs of the profession that you were in. So I thought that was kind of interesting because I didn't look at it that way. So, and of course they used those aprons to protect themselves from dust and dirt and other substance, because I'm sure it was very difficult to keep their clothes clean. I don't know if they were as hygienic as we are anyway, but... So aprons were primarily used for practical purposes, such as protecting the clothing, carrying tools, and storing small items. I can remember my grandmother used to store her rosary beads, and she used to have a hanky in one, rosary beads in the other. So kitchen aprons, actually in the 18th and 19th century, they became, when cooking became more prominent in households. How can I say when cooking became more prominent in households? Didn't even the cavemen have to cook something? I wonder if they wore aprons too. Well, anyway, we used to use aprons, and housekeepers used to wear aprons, and they were specifically used for kitchen duty. And they were mostly made of cotton, linen, canvas. They had very simple designs. They weren't anything fancy. But in the 20th century, with the rise of textile factories, with the improvement in fabric, and I had to flip my thing so I make sure I don't think about everything. Aprons, they became more affordable, widely available, and mid-century and in the 50s, homemakers always wore aprons. I can remember my mother wearing an apron. I can remember my, I already told you my babci, my grandmother, always wore an apron. So I was born in 48, so I probably would only remember like in the 50s and 60s, but I can remember her sitting in her rocking chair with her apron on. I don't remember, she had one of these types of aprons. She had her rosary beads in one and a hanky in the other, and she was very rotund because she didn't wear a bra, she wore a t-shirt, so she was kind of rounded in the front, but she really wasn't overweight. I never imagined her as being a large person. But I do remember her having that kind of rounded front. Anyway, she wore an apron all the time, whether she was cooking or whether she was just sitting there and doing nothing. Well, she never really just sat there and did nothing, but I'm having a hard time with my throat today. So you'll have to bear with me. Hopefully you can understand what I'm saying, because I can tell I'm getting hoarser and hoarser. Anyway, they started featuring more decorative designs. They had different patterns. They had different colors. We had in the mid-20th century, mid-century, they started having ruffles and different patterns, and they had other feminine touches. And they even expanded to like barbecue aprons, where they had things written on them like World's Greatest Cook, or Kiss the Cook, or hot food coming through, or whatever they did. So it wasn't just aprons for the homemakers, it was aprons for anyone associated with food. A lot of times you see server aprons when you go into a restaurant. They have a small black apron or a colored apron that has pockets where they keep their checkbook in and their pens, and where they take their orders and stuff. So aprons have been around for a long, long time. Nowadays, there are so many homemakers, and homesteaders and people that love the vintage look, that if you go on Etsy, you can buy an apron. If you go to a craft show or you go to a county fair, you see aprons all over the place, and they're really pretty. Some of them are made with vintage fabrics, some of them are made with plain fabrics but maybe have one big design. Some people use them as promotions. When we bought our house, the realtor that we purchased the house from, gave us an apron with, it said "On the Rocks." That's what we call our house, On the Rocks, because if you've seen any of the scenery things, you know that our house is on a lot of rocks. So the apron said "On the Rocks." Anyway, maybe I'll have an apron made for Senior Insights, and I'll sell it in my YouTube store that I have never created and probably never will. But if I do, maybe I'll have an apron available. Who knows? Who knows? So there's all kinds of different aprons, mother and daughter aprons. They're usually an expression of who you are. If you have an apron like this, you're plain Jane. I have 3 aprons. I have this one and one that looks exactly like it, except it's tan. They came in a set from Amazon, and I hate them. I don't like the fabric. They're not absorbent. When I think of an apron, I think of something you can wipe your hands on, and this just doesn't cut it. It's some kind of polyester material that I'm sure is not absorbent. The reason I say that with hesitation is because I hardly ever wear them. I wipe my hands on my jeans that I wear for a week. Now you know I'm exaggerating. So enough about aprons. I want to talk about bibs. And bibs have been around for centuries and centuries. And yes, they were used on babies, but also in ancient Egypt and Rome, some of those hoity-toity people, royalty, would wear bibs as part of their outfit. Women's dresses had bibs. I don't know a lot about it, but yes, they wore bibs. And they probably were a pretense for keeping their clothes clean, as well as looking very royal. We've all used bibs with our babies, and bibs have evolved too, from little terry cloth bibs. Do you remember those ones that had the plastic or vinyl on the back and they'd get all cracked and crumbly and you'd still use them? I did anyway. Nowadays they have such cute, adorable bibs. They have a bib that's embroidered for every holiday. So it's my first Christmas, my first Easter, or they have bunnies, or they have Santa Clauses, or whatever. And they're cute. I don't see why you would keep buying those bibs, because all you need is a few, but that's just me. And I think we go overboard with some of these things. But that's neither here nor there. I'm talking about bibs. Nowadays they have these things that are like hard plastic, and they have a scoop at the bottom so that any drips or anything go inside the scoop. Have you seen those? They look like they'd be very uncomfortable, but they look like they'd do the job, because first of all, they would be easy to clean, and they wouldn't, the food wouldn't land in the baby's laps. But I want to talk about adult bibs, because I need one. Does anyone else get food on their shirts whenever they eat? I do, every single time. I can have an apron on like this, and it will land right here. Or it'll land someplace where the bib is not, or it will go down the front of the apron. So I want a bib that goes up here and goes all the way over to my shoulders, because I'm sick of ruining my clothes. And spaghetti sauce and stuff like that doesn't come out, in my experience. I'm sure someone in the comments is going to say, well, this is what I do for spaghetti sauce. And then I'll try it and see if it works. But it's also a sign, well, how do I put this? Lots of times they use bibs in nursing homes, especially long-term care facilities where the patients are there for the rest of their lives. Or sometimes in assisted living they use them. Now, they're not so much frowned upon in the long-term care, but in the assisted living, they sort of are. And that's because they're seen as kind of an affront to your dignity. So in other words, if you have to wear a bib, you must be a slob and get it all over yourself just like a baby. And so we shouldn't just automatically put bibs on people. But in my case, I would want a bib because I wouldn't want my clothes getting destroyed. What do you guys think about bibs, adult bibs? Now, I have a friend who has some adult bibs. She had to make them for a store that she was working for. She's a seamstress, and she's a very good seamstress. Anyway, she has these bibs, and the store went out of business, so now she's got all these bibs. She keeps telling me that she's going to give me a bib, but I have not seen that bib yet. It has a lobster on it. It probably is not adequate to meet my needs, but she promised me, and I still don't have them. I was thinking, maybe, did I talk about this when I was talking about the aprons, of making having a senior insight apron at my YouTube store that I've never started and probably never will? But what do you think about that idea? Or maybe a bib with maybe a picture of Quinny on it or something. Anyway, this isn't quite up to my usual standard of videos, but I'm going to say thank you. I'm going to ask you to come back tomorrow. I'll think of something better to talk about and more interesting. But reminisce, or go and buy one, or better yet, go and make one. I didn't even have one sip of coffee. It's ice cold. Ugh, it's gross. Bring your coffee tomorrow. Thank you. Please subscribe and write your comments below. Thank you.